Finally it was over. Another operation. Another baby born. Another night was over too. Another day to face. I have to tell you, David, how I felt that morning. 2 nights in a row without sleeping. I was exhausted. I kept thinking, no one must see how I feel. It's nobody's fault. It's the war. There's too much to do. Babies have to be born just the same. Yes, it was morning, but not for me. Another day to get through. I couldn't do it. Only to you can I tell the truth, David. Only to my husband could I admit this. I was finished. Outside in the streets, Jerusalem was just waking up. How could they do it, the others? There you were, David. You smiled and waved, as though nothing were happening. What could I do? I pretended the same thing.
Shalom, Naomi. Achzor bekarov.
But I knew you were going out on patrol. And suddenly, I knew that something was going to happen. I tried to pull myself together. If I could only get some sleep. I had to make that nursing class in 3 hours. Better try to get some sleep, I told myself. I really felt ashamed for being so tired. I knew what other people went through in this war. On one street, every tree was hung with signs, forwarding addresses, people who had moved because their houses no longer existed. I didn't even get halfway home, David. There it was again. And suddenly I was part of it. I was back at work. Worked till the end. How? With whose strength when I had none of my own? An hour ago I was finished. Now I started all over again. How? Maybe you could have told me, David. You've been through the same thing yourself in the army. Working, training for months to be able to do a job when you had to do it, without resting, without thinking. Like the job your platoon was up against that morning. The enemy gun post in the hills that cut off the supply route to the city. It had to be destroyed.
שבו והקשיבו. ובכן אתה, אברהם, אתה תיקח את קבוצתך לעיקוף ימיני בשעה שאני אתקיף התקפה חזיתית. אתם תתחפרו על הגבעה שממול ותפתחו באש חזקה אותו רגע שאתם תראו רקטה אדומה. האם זה מובן וברור לכולם? ישנן איזשהן שאלות?
I made that class, David, and I realized what made me keep going that morning. It was all the things that happened to me when I myself was a student nurse. It was classes, lectures, drill, practice, in one Hadassah hospital after another, until I became the sort of person who'll completely exhausted, could run to answer an emergency alarm in spite of herself. A nurse. That lesson I had to pass on to my students. Zipporah, who was born to be a nurse. Helen devoted herself to every mother and child who came in. Helen was the one, you know, who grew up in that French orphanage. Even among these, Ruth was special. She was the girl I told you about, who came to the school with 3 friends. One day, when Ruth was sick, her friends answered an emergency call. You know what happened, David. Now Ruth will never be satisfied, except by doing the work of 4 people. You know her whole story, the usual story that goes back to the concentration camp. Yes, Ruth is going to make a nurse. They all will. Our emergency hospitals were doing twice the job for which they were intended. We were short of everything. Wards, beds, equipment, everything. The strain never let up for a minute. Well, maybe for a minute. It felt good. It was too good to last. The head nurse wanted me. Not another operation. I couldn't. Not again. This morning was one thing, but this was too much. I had to tell her, David, I was going to. But I didn't have to. No, it wasn't anything like that. It was the most wonderful news. Avram, my little brother Avram, was arriving in Haifa today, and I could go meet him in an ambulance that was just leaving. For the second time that day, I felt like another person. I didn't think about my job or the war or those burnt-out trucks along the road. Once again, I forgot I was tired. All I thought about was Avram, and that seemed to give me new strength. With Avram, we could have a family. You and Avram and I, a real family. I couldn't wait to tell you. Would I ever get the chance?